This Detroit News Podcast is brought to you by Varsity Ford of Ann Arbor.
Welcome to Detroit Faith City, our Detroit News faith-based podcast. I'm Mark Falkner, Detroit News assistant sports editor, joined today by pastors Adam Burt and Ron Lewis. This podcast, Detroit Faith City, highlights Detroit athletes, entertainers, and public figures and their journeys of faith, along with their spiritual mentors. And together, they explain what faith means to them, lessons they've learned, and they'll teach us about topics like grace, humility, forgiveness, hope, and strength in the face of tough times. Gentlemen, welcome to our podcast. Pastor Adam, you're a former NHL defenseman, 14 years in the NHL with the Whalers, Hurricanes, Flyers, and Thrashers. And for the past 20 years, you've been the lead pastor of Every Nation churches in New York and Northern New Jersey. And you've also written a book called The Longest Game, Winning in Life. And you're also the team chaplain for the New York Jets. So starting there, your faith journey, going from playing road hockey in your driveway, growing up here in Detroit, to starting a church with Pastor Ron. How did that happen?
Yeah, I don't know how much time we got, Mark, how deep into the weeds you want me to go. But yeah, I grew up in the Detroit area, and something happened that I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to. My parents divorced real young. I was about 11 years old, man.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was I would call him he was a nominal Catholic at the time. We call it CEO, Christmas and Easter only, right? and then my mom was agnostic, and so something odd happened. My father got custody of us, by both my brother and sister and I, and my mom was just kind of searching, for herself. And then she found herself drawn to a church, and there she heard the gospel, man, that Jesus saves, and God just revolutionized her life. And then it was funny, she wanted the same for her kids, man. And so she invited us to a church, and then Mark, that night they showed a movie about the end of the world, like Armageddon, get the mark of the beast, it was just craziness, right? But I tell you what, I was like, I'll take Jesus, please. And at an early age, I went up to the altar, and my life was never the same. And so I had an early relationship and walk with God, but then I moved away from home at 16 years old to go up to North Bay, Ontario to play the OHL, the Ontario Hockey League. And how many know when you're 16, I said, Jesus, you can have some of me, but I still want to go do what I want to do. And 16 years old, I went away, and it's just kind of like screw around, partying on the weekends, do stuff. God, I'm sorry, I'll never do that again. Repeat over and over and over until finally my draft year was, I think it was 1987. And it was at Joe Louis Arena.
Joe Louis, right.
Yeah. And I remember right there, I was supposed to go in the first round, 12th overall. I wound up going 39th overall, really late in the second round. It just felt like a demonstrative failure. I was like, man, I am screwing up my life being the halfway guy. And I decided right there at Joe Louis Arena, Lord, I'm putting all my chips in with you. Really fell into the lordship of Jesus Christ there at Joe Louis Arena, and just started getting serious about with the Lord and his word. And then I'll let Pastor Ron, he can kind of tell how we connected eventually in North Carolina when I was playing for the Carolina Hurricanes.
So Pastor Ron, let's pick it up there. And what did you see in Adam back then when you were looking for a faithful servant back in Carolina, where the NHL, the Hartford Whalers, had transferred to Carolina?
Yeah, I remember being in a breakfast meeting, and I pulled out the N&O newspaper at Raleigh, and that's where I first found out that we were going to have a professional sports team right here in our backyard. And as I was reading the article, I had this nudge that I'm going to be touching people in that team, and I was shocked by this because I'm not a hockey guy. I'm not a MMA guy like Pastor Adam. He's been beat up quite a few times. But it was when I was reading that, I just prayed into it. And when I got home that afternoon, one of my sons, who was probably about 10 or 11 years old, he came to me and he said, hey, there's a hockey guy. He's playing for the Carolina Hurricanes. He's right up the street from us. So that happened. And then Adam and I have a mutual friend who, John Blue, he was the goalie for the Boston Bruins. And he shot me a call. He said, "Hey, my friend Adam Burt is going to be in your city. You might want to get to know him." I said, "Well, send me his number." So I got his phone number and I called Adam and I didn't even know what to say. I was a little bit nervous about it. Here's a professional hockey player. And I just didn't know what to say. And I just simply said, "Hey, I'm Ron Lewis. I'm a pastor in the city. What can I do to serve you? How can I help you?" And then boom, Pastor Adam, it was a long pause. And I thought he's going to think I'm a salesman or something like that. And there was a long pause. And he said, "Susan," he just screamed for his wife. He said, "Susan, there's a guy on the phone and he wants to know how he can help us." And it was right in the middle of Adam's chaotic moment where he had all of his friends and family and everybody was coming into town. And I ended up doing an airport run for him. And from that moment onward, Pastor Adam and I have been just close friends.
Hey,
That's
Mark,
part.
if I would have known he was going to be my boss, I would have treated him much nicer. But
You would have treated him a lot nicer, Adam.
would've.
Absolutely. That's part one of Detroit Faith City. We'll take a quick break and be right back after this word from our main sponsor, Varsity Ford of Ann Arbor.
For 44 years, Varsity Ford in Ann Arbor has been more than just a dealership. We're a family, proudly serving yours. As one of the top volume Ford dealers in the world, we're proof that when you treat people right, they come back generation after generation. And now we make it easier than ever with complimentary pickup and delivery for both sales and service. So you can buy or service your Ford without leaving home. Varsity Ford, driven by family, built on tradition.
We're back for part two of Detroit Faith City with our special guests, Pastors Adam Burt and Ron Lewis. Pastor Adam, the main topic of today's podcast is the leap of faith both of you took after 9/11, 2001. Almost 25 years ago, you followed Pastor Ron to Manhattan amid the rubble of those tragic events and found light in the darkness. How did that happen? And what have you learned, especially in those early years?
Yeah, well, Mark, what happened for me is it was amazing. I got traded from Carolina to Philadelphia, and Pastor Ron Lewis just stayed in my life the whole time. And so I just want to encourage young people, man, to seek out a Paul, if you will, in your life, a mentor, someone that'll disciple you and pour into your life. And just Pastor Ron, he just wouldn't leave, man. I remember one time I actually had I got like 14 plates in my face, and I had to have all this orbital surgery. I should have ducked to left, and but Pastor Ron, when I woke up in the hospital, it wasn't my dad or my mother that was there. It was my pastor. It was Pastor Ron was there, and so that spoke volumes to me. And he was someone who was just calling out kind of a destiny and calling. I was like, man, I didn't see any kind of ministry. I thought I'd get into broadcasting, and then I would just kind of be a part of the local church, and then Pastor Ron just kept calling out destiny to me, and then. Little did I know, my last game in professional hockey would be at Madison Square Gardens in New York. Finished the game. The following game we played against the New York Islanders. I played like 30 seconds, blew out my back, and would never play another game. Little did I know that the God would bring me back in 2002, back to Manhattan to help Pastor Ron Lewis build the church in Manhattan after the tragedies of 9/11.
Pastor Ron, you've written a book about 9/11 called Miracles in Manhattan, Stories of Hope and Faith from the Heart of New York City. So many stories, the firemen and police officers who went into the burning towers, the families left behind, the lives transformed with new meaning and purpose. And in one story, you officiated a wedding 4 years later on 9/11, 2005, a couple from Manila who met in Midtown Manhattan, David and Nadia Miller, and they wanted to, quote, celebrate God's redemption in their lives and in the lives of so many New Yorkers. So where were you on 9/11? And now in hindsight, what does the word miracle mean to you now that you may not have known back then?
Wow, that's a great question, Mark. I think, first of all, we had this sense that we needed to go to New York City. We being me and some friends, Dr. Rice Brooks and some other pastors and a few friends went with us. And I was like literally on the sofa. I just was paralyzed by what had happened. And by God's grace, we said we have to overcome what we feel. Let's go into the city, pass out water, pass out prayers, see what we could do to help. And while we were headed into Manhattan, we were driving. There were no air flights at the time, as we all remember. This is on 9/13, so 2 days after the event. And when we were in that city, I was driving right into the city. I was looking to the right. We were going over the George Washington Bridge. Many people know exactly where we were at that time. And I saw the unbelievable amount of smoke and the ashes and everything just going up. And right when I saw that, a surprise came to me, and it had to be from God, our Father. And these words hit me: out of these ashes, I will build a great church. That changed my perspective instantly. And when I heard that, I thought, yes, we can't just mourn it. We have to take action and see what we can do to see a redemption happen in this city. And that's where our church began about a month later on 44th Street. Adam was on 34th at Madison Square Garden. We were on 44th Street in a theater that was it was called the Lambs Club. There's still a plaque. It was sold to a hotel industry, but it's a big plaque honoring the Lambs Theater. This is where Mark Twain wrote, and all kinds of great actors, and it was a men's club. And then it became the Nazarene Church, and then it became our place where we met every Sunday night for 5 years in a row. And that was such a revival of young people pouring in, models and actors and athletes, quarterback of Columbia University, and then the professional athletes came later when Pastor Adam was the chaplain. But that's a little bit of how it began and how God motivated us to get with it and to serve that city.
Pastor Adam, nearly 3,000 people died at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, 2,977. 42 of those victims were connected to the state of Michigan, including Flint's Todd Beamer, who was on Flight 93, a Christian who recited the Lord's Prayer in the 23rd Psalm. The 23rd Psalm begins, "The Lord is my shepherd," and continues in the 4th verse, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." Todd Beamer was just 32, a Christ follower who led the charge on the cockpit with the rallying cry, "Let's roll." My question for you: what else does the Bible say about anger, righteous anger, and forgiveness when bad things happen to good people? How do you help people, Pastor Adam, process those feelings?
Yeah, well, I would say number one, the Bible would disagree with being good people. You know, it says that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. You know what I mean? And so, but when bad things happen, it's funny. So I'll share this analogy. So Mark, when I was in the NHL, so I've had like close to 500 stitches. I've had 5 back surgeries, knee reconstruction. I've had my face reconstructed on both sides. One time I got a slap shot in the face. It split my jaw here and here. But Mark, you know what I never did? Whenever I got hit, I never once says, "What in the world? How did that happen?" Right? Because hockey is a violent and a fast sport. And if you play in it long enough, you're going to get dinged up. And it's so true. We don't live Genesis 1 and 2. There's peace. Everything is good. Everything's right. And then we get Genesis 3 and the world's broken. And so you live in this thing long enough, man, in a sinful, broken world is going to ding you up. But here's the great news, and why the gospel is such great news is, man, Jesus says, "I'm coming back again, and I'm going to fix this thing and make everything right." And then, Mark, like when we see tragedies like 9/11 and evil, then we can point to Jesus hates that stuff as much as you do or more, and that's why he says he's coming to fix it again and make all things new. And so that's kind of like when tragedy and stuff hits. That's my appeal to people. We're in a story. The story's not finished yet. But we get to play our part in God's story to help redeem what's broken in the world. Pastor Ron's a great example of that. Wherever he goes, he brings restoration, redemption, and so he's been a great example to me.
Pastor Ron, one last question about 9/11, specifically your story as told in your book. You said your marriage of 18 years was ending just as you were starting this church in that old historic theater. You said your 4 sons were suffering and you heard internal voices of doubt and condemnation, but you said you resisted those voices, citing 1 Corinthians, God can use the foolish things of this world to confound the wise. So what did you learn about transformation? And how is your life better for being obedient back then?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story. We were, Adam was almost into the city at this time when we really felt like we needed to put some advertisement out. And it was a long shot because it was very expensive to have a full page advertisement for 3 months. Mm-hmm. Extremely expensive. And yet we somehow felt like the urgency of the moment to get people while they're suffering and to bring them in. And so we ran this ad, and it was called Miracle on 44th Street. And that was our beginning place in that Lamb's Theater. And I was just so upset about it because only one person showed up from that advertisement. It was so expensive, and it just felt like it was a waste. I wanted to call the owner of this magazine company. It's a global magazine company. I said, your magazine doesn't work. However, that one person ended up to be the woman who I would marry, and we have been married to her for 20 some years. And so that's where we met and how we met. Her mother was reading that magazine, saw it. She said to her daughter, Lynette, who was working at Deloitte at the World Financial Center. She was in the middle of all that chaos that was going on in 9/11. But it was out of those ashes that many miracles came forth. And we're just very grateful for the grace of God. And Adam Burt was a hero of heroes. And he really became a key leader of everything that we were doing. And this book right here, this book is great. This book, I could not put it down. I advise everybody to get a copy of the book. How often do you hear a spirit-filled, godly, humble hockey player? I mean, the Canadian guys are humble. They are humble guys, but a lot of them just have yet to get to know a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. So that's what we did. We baptized tons and tons of people. It was so much fun and joy. We would go out to Tony's Dinopoly on 43rd Street. Every Sunday night, we'd stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning celebrating what God was doing in that place.
Mark, if I can share a quick, you guys, like you said, you could step
Absolutely.
out if
Absolutely.
you want, but it's funny, just to give you a shot of just how cool it was. We were just in such a season of grace where, you know, I barely know what I'm doing, you know, and yet God is just saving people. And we, one particular time, like people were just getting baptized like crazy. And so Mark, well, in one baptism, I baptized a young lady, Evie, who was a part of a vampire cult. All these tattoos on her, piercings, and we baptized her in the waters of baptism. Followed up by a Russian man, 78 years old. He wanted to prove to me he was still tough, so he did dips on the baptismal before. Then there was a 19-year-old Chinese student that barely spoke a lick of English, but she knew she needed to honor the Lord in baptism. And then an 11-year-old little girl we baptized. So I'm like, where in the world do all those people, I mean, they have nothing in common but one thing, the main thing, that Jesus Christ had radically saved their life, you know?
That's the end of part 2 of our podcast, and time now to hear from 2 more of our sponsors, Detroit Skyview and Toon Talks. When we come back, we'll wrap up our faith-based conversation with Pastors Adam Burt and Ron Lewis.
This is what your backyard was meant to feel like. A more human approach for the human experience. Live out your vision, your dreams, and your next stage of outdoor luxury living solutions from Skyview. Live out today at skyviewdetroit.com.
Some conversations were never meant to be recorded. This one was. Dick Schultz, University of Iowa basketball coach, ran the NCAA, and led the United States Olympic Committee. Kevin Crampton, author of Tuned, former CEO, who has led billion-dollar deals around the globe and credits Dick as his greatest mentor. Welcome to Tuned Talks.
We're back for the final segment of Detroit Faith City. Our last question is a question we ask of all of our guests. What do you tell the younger generation about faith, and does faith still matter? Pastor Adam, in your book, you have 3 sections: missing the mark about life's most important questions, training to win the non-negotiables, and playing to win the strategies for getting into the game. So how have younger people in your ministry reacted to these messages?
Yeah, you know what? Especially Mark, I feel like especially in the last year or so, there's been a real push and young men and women searching, for the things of God. And you know what I really feel like is they've kind of looked for answers in all these other places other than Jesus Christ. And it was funny. I was with the Jets this morning, and we were doing a Bible study, and just at the time of this is being filmed, one of the Jets players was shot, and so it really lets people see what's really important. So Bishop Brown, you'll remember this. So it was 2009, January 15th, my birthday, by the way, Mark, if you were wondering. And Pastor Brown took me to a movie, and so we were in a movie theater in Manhattan when all of a sudden all our phones started blowing up with these text messages, and they were like, "Was there another plane attack on Manhattan?" And you guys will remember it was the Miracle on the Hudson, where they had landed the plane on the Hudson River. And there's a passenger, Rick Elias, who was in that, and he said he mentioned the fact that when life gets busy, our priorities, what's important, what's not important, gets super blurry. He says, but when you hear the words "brace for impact," he says when he heard those words, suddenly everything became crystal clear. And I think we're getting to a clarity now when 2 things, for young people is just the question of eternity. Man, Jesus says, what good is it if you gain everything and lose your one and only soul? And then I think they're finding out as well, too, is that, man, the words and ways of Jesus just work best. So if you just take, I always challenge people, listen, if you don't believe that God's ways work best, just take the 10 commandments and do the opposite of them. And then do it for 3 weeks. I want you to lie, commit adultery, do all that stuff. And then let's get back together 3 weeks from now. And I want to see how your life's going. If you're not dead, divorced, incarcerated, you know what I mean? So, because God's ways leads to flourishing. And so young people are searching for answers. And I think Christ and the Bible answer those questions best.
And Pastor Ron, what about the younger generations? You talk about spreading the good news of the Gospels and reaching young and old. What have you seen in your walk with the Lord?
Yeah, so I'll go back in time when Adam and I were just getting to know each other. He showed up at a Starbucks in Durham, North Carolina, and he asked me, or he told me, he said, I really want to get some help in being a better disciple of Jesus. And so it was a slow pitch for me. And I said, well, look, Adam, I've got 3 options for you. And by the way, he was a young man at that time. He was in his 20s. I think he was in his 20s. And he was a young man, and he had a great heart. He had a good story, good background. And that was the question was, how can I help him? That's kind of what he was asking. I said, all right, Adam, I got 3 options for you. Number 1, passive. Passive. I'll see you at church when you can come, which was not very often because he was on the road all the time. So there was the passive element. He said, no, he said, I want more than that. I said, okay, how about if I send you some, maybe some, back then it was cassette tapes, I'll send you cassette tapes. I'll be on the road with you when I can. And then the third, I said, but here's the ultimate. And maybe this is not for you. I said, why? I said, I want to be, as an option, I want it to be rigorous, tough, and I want to be in your life, in your family, in your marriage, and the places that may be dark for you. I said, now, which of those three do you want? And I honestly thought he'd just take the middle of the road.
Sure.
He said, I want it all. And so from that point onward, I would be in their kitchen. I would talk to his wife. I talked to his kids. And Adam passed every test that God gave him, and he became this great minister, reaching hundreds and even thousands of people in New York City. And it's been a great joy to walk with him and watch what he's done and accomplished through New York, New Jersey, and even other places, Pennsylvania, et cetera. And I'm just proud of this guy. And thank you, Mark, for this opportunity.
Pastors Adam Burt and Ron Lewis, thanks again for making time for us today and talking about your faith journeys on Detroit Faith City. All the best to both of you.
Thanks, Mark. Bless you, bro.
Thanks.